Hey, and welcome back to the Center for the History of Video Games and Technology and Critical Play, where for the last few weeks we've been live streaming our curriculum development, a curriculum development we're calling Twitching Twine. I'm Sean Smith. This is Jeff Lawler. And this week we're going to kind of come back into where we had left off with the character sheet and talk about how students bring research to the project or given some research, how we're going to approach the building of our Twine game with a previous game and research that we're bringing to the project. And hopefully we'll be able to show how that works with this new character sheet that we're playing with.
Yeah, that's what we're doing. We had a big show to get this set up today, so we're just getting into it. We are, as Sean talked about, one of the things we referenced last week, we'll be looking at more today, is having students bring or us giving students the research to begin the project. That way we take kind of a step out. So with our upper division 306 class, they're bringing research from other classes, which will have a full bibliography. So they'll have something they can build with, and that's really important. And then with the lower division class, the survey classes, they'll be provided with a set of primary and secondary documents that they can then augment. But that gives them a start to create an environment, to create characters, and then we can have discussions about what they might need or not need. Now, for Sean and I's purposes, we are using this game in a bag. So this is a game, it's a board game based around social class and communication in 1865, and situated around Lincoln's assassination, though Lincoln's not in it. And for the game, we had to develop a lot of context for it and characters for it. So we have, for ourselves, something we can begin with to create a Twine game. So for us, this is our bibliography that we are going to import, just like our lower division students and our upper division students will do.
Right. So for those upper division, for that 306 or that upper division class, what we're asking them to do, and I think Jeff just said this, but I'm going to be repetitive, is to bring a project that they are building. Both our students... You did? Wow. See, that's how it works. But they come to this class usually from a class that we call 301, which is our Introduction to Research Methods course. And it's in that course that they build or create their first large research paper for their history education. And rather than have them have to kind of reinvent the wheel, we ask that they bring these larger projects with them so that they don't have to be engaged in new research while also trying to learn how to do the Twine side of things. So most of them will already have an annotated bibliography from that project, and what we're hoping to do to streamline this a little bit is to then have them take that bibliography, maybe in class, and discuss with each other within groups or with us how we can make those sources from that previous project work to create a game. For the 172 side of things, right, as Jeff had already just said, so more repetitiveness.
Yeah, it's
a source pack. Yeah, it's a source pack, but
it's a curated source pack from, in this case, you.
Right,
but I've developed these also. But
right.
Yeah.
But there, the students will have to clearly read those sources, and these will have both secondary and primary sources in them. They'll read them. I have a couple of already pre-built how to read primary source worksheets, how to engage with the secondary source worksheets that they'll participate in, and then decide for themselves as a group which of the sources from the pack will help them kind of both imagine a game world and the characters that are situated in it, but also will help them kind of propel themselves forward with this project. So by the time we get to the character sheet, hopefully we have, right, both of those groups at a point where they have a bibliography of sources that they can reference to help them create these characters and build out the world.
Yeah, I think the character and kind of the general environment, milieu around them. I know I've been talking a lot in my class as they're dissecting games now is to keep thinking about that environment, which is, I think we mentioned in our first session that can be a very difficult thing for them to do. And so I actually played a game with them partly today, Attentat 1942, where you can really see how the objects and artifacts become part of the game, right? These are historical. Sometimes they're just a radio, right? But that becomes, it's from the time. It sets a tone for that era. Simple things as the music or the clothes or the atmosphere that's outside, the noises that you hear. And that game is mostly visual, but there's a lot of text in it. And then it's conveying that in a textual manner. So a lot of the sources are to get this character development, but to get that character in an environment that's appropriate. And so Sean and I have talked about this. If we can get them to create a character that's, has a lot of these features, then they can start to imagine that historical world they inhabit more clearly than they have in the past.
And so with Twine, and especially in kind of previous projects, a lot of our students, they want to try to impress us with the, like, look what we're doing with Twine, and that's great. But often it means kind of using Google search photos or using modern music that is supposed to replicate the time period, but sometimes they don't get it quite right, or it's not, or they're using sound effects that wouldn't necessarily kind of be a part of this world. And I mean that's not a space. It's not a space where I would grade them down either for something like that. Right? They're using their creativity and they're trying to engage the player and make something more than just a text-based adventure game. But it also can be a little bit distracting, and it feels often a little anachronistic. So here, what we're trying to do is try to really get them to focus on the time period and to think about what the world really would look like, and how their characters would kind of work within this space. So Jeff has the Lincoln game that was born out of a discussion at DHSI.
It was
several years ago.
Probably like 5 or 6 years ago, maybe. Yeah. And so the idea of the game, and the game was probably made like 5 years ago, and we played it a lot, and then it sat there, and then Sean, we were talking about making a game, and Sean's like, why don't we use that? And that made a lot of sense. I hadn't really thought about it, because there was a lot of research and a lot of time that went into this, thinking about it. And we're not going into what the game does, but the game has these 12 characters. These characters, this is how developed it is, right?
I'm going to switch out to the big camera.
There you go. And some of the cards are a bit fancier. You see I haven't got an artist to work on it, but there's these classes. There's social classes, sort of lower working class characters, and the game has 12 characters, and the lower class has characters like rag picker, and then they have certain attributes and abilities that have been kind of historically researched. The next class is this I'm sorry, the red class was like lower class, like obviously rag picker, there's a boot black in there. Then the next class is kind of is this which one did I have it? Yellow.
Middling class here, which here we have a railroad employee, right? And so there's a number of characters there that are employed. There's a tavern keep for one of them. There's a stable keep for another of them. So we can start to imagine these characters already in our mind, even though we have some historical reference for them. And then the next class is blue, which is sort of Blue Bloods, upper class.
Not quite upper class, but broaching that a bit above yellow, right? And here we have a printer.
So more, I was going to say artisanal, but artisanal, but it's like But they're kind of in the same world.
They're yeah, in
they
some
occupy
ways.
the same worlds
Yes.
in some ways. Yeah.
Yeah, there is some crossover. Dry goods keeper, and I know there's a bunch of them here. Dressmaker, and then we have the final class, which is upper class, and we have a lawyer, we have a lady, right? So, inventor. Right, there's a whole lot of things we could have done with this, but we also wanted to make the characters something that students could want to think about in some ways.
And embody without being told necessarily how to embody them.
Yeah, right. And you can almost imagine them in some ways without a full. And the idea was these character cards also would have a full character built behind them, which is what we will do here. Now, the other idea with the game was about communication. I think what we'll employ with variables in the game in some way was only some classes could speak to other classes, right? So someone from the lowest class, a rag picker, is not going to be able to speak to a lawyer directly, right? There's sort of taboos and social distinctions here. But a red character might hear what a green character is saying, right? And not be able to communicate that with them, but have knowledge of certain things in certain spaces, right? So we were looking at seeing how, one thing that happens with our students is characters just meet up and talk with everybody at any time, right? It's like their world is open communication. And part of the game was to show that, no, communication's closed. Social circles are closed. Economic circles are closed to certain communities. And I think by employing this in a game, that was the idea, but then employing it in what we're going to do
with Twine.
Twine will really kind of enforce that and help give students the idea that you have to be very careful about what world your character can thrive in or connect with or speak to. These spaces are not just open spaces of communication.
They're not open, but they are permeable, right?
Yes.
So somebody like a bootblack who may be shining some, the lawyer's shoes in a certain social situation will have that opportunity to overhear conversation and it's not suggesting that the bootblack would totally understand that part of that conversation, but at least they're made privy to that conversation and can use that information, right? At least in this game, you can use that information to kind of try to stop the assassination, in the Twine game, we're still trying to kind of like work out how that mechanic is going to translate back into Twine. But it does, I think, that by having these kind of social classes at the ready and these characters who will occupy these, right? I think we can show students the limitations, right? That there are ramifications for your class, there are ramifications for race, and those really do kind of preclude the kinds of access that you have as a person within this world. Yeah. So I think that takes us into the character sheet.
And there, it's the access to that world, but also what you could do with that information. Right. There's only so much, or how you understood it. Like as Sean mentioned, like you might not know what the lawyer is communicating exactly, but you have this idea that you may internalize in a very different way than its intent, even though it's not spoken towards you. And then we can start looking at the character, because I think through the kind of a basic character development, we could start to develop and show how we think about this.
Right. You have, well, I suppose we could start with the character sheet, right? And so again, this is presupposing that students have a set of research documents in front of them. They've gone through those research documents and they've thought about how those primary sources were created, who might have created them, and how you might be able to imagine a character that created, the diary that they were looking at, or how a character might engage with a newspaper article that they've been reading.
Or not, because
or not
they're
be
illiterate,
able to.
right?
Yeah, right.
That's something that's forgotten also.
who do we want to build out in this instance?
I don't know. We haven't talked about it.
We could roll a
much.
dice.
We could. We could do that.
We have a 12-sided die.
We have a 12-sided die.
We're going to roll a 12-sided die.
This is our bag of dice.
And see who we get to build out.
Of course, we'll have to say there's sort of a numbering system here, starting from one up there.
To the top. Yeah, you all can't see that, but I suppose I could turn on another camera. You
could. 12-sided.
12-sided die.
There it is.
All right, so that's
It's
1,
official.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
If you say so.
Okay. 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and it landed right on that.
Is that the one we want for real?
That's what the dice picked.
It did.
So, it looks like we're going to be developing a lawyer character.
Not my top choice. But...
Right. Now, this is not something that we would allow. Or, well, maybe it is how we should get students to think about their characters.
To think about their characters in sort of a random
in a random way, yes.
World.
Right. Give them a slew of characters, let them roll a die, and find out who they're going to build. So this will be one of probably 4 or 5 player characters in the game that we're thinking about for our students going into these games. I'm this semester, especially for the 170, the lower division course, I'm going to restrict their player character to a single character. So I don't get, in the past I've gotten games where groups, rather than doing group work and working together to create a character, end up creating a character tree. So there's 3 different characters the player can choose from, and all 3 members of the group just write separate narratives that are kind of tangentially tied together as they build the game out. So here, what I'd really like for them to do is just kind of focus on a single character and really concentrate on building the world out of it in that space.
And we don't have to do it here, but I think we talked about last time. I put my 12-sided away, but having and some
NPCs,
functional NPCs
right,
that could be used
okay,
or should be used
right,
in the game, and we won't build them out here, but just for pretend purposes, we would say
a cook.
Mm-hmm. 4 is very popular. A rag
picker.
And a dressmaker.
Yeah.
So in some ways now we have
populated the world with characters.
That we could then build out.
Right.
Using one as our.
Right. The lawyer becomes kind of the primary player character. Maybe the dressmaker, cook, and rag pickers are these NPCs that the lawyer is going to have some kind of interaction with it as they move through. But I think having the notion of of a kind of these NPCs and having students build NPCs before engaging with the game's narrative itself helps to kind of, I hate the word force, but it's going to kind of
frame it.
Yeah, it frames the world, right? So now you don't have that kind of random encounter, and I'm not talking random in a kind of mechanics way, but just all of a sudden somebody will just come out of the blue
because
the narrative.
They just thought about it, literally.
Because as they're writing, they're like, oh yeah, this is when that guy's going to pop up.
Right.
So here you have these kind of predefined NPCs that you're going to have to fit into the world in a way, and maybe if it's a lawyer and a dressmaker, it's possible that during the game's narrative, the lawyer is buying a gift for a spouse or something like that, and they have that for his. Well, we didn't roll her into the game, so we're going to have to invent another NPC, right? So think about this then, right? Once they kind of have a sense of who they're trying to build out, right? So we know in this case that we're going to be building out a lawyer, and we would start right with the kind of the basics here, just to get them thinking about the character.
So they imagine a person,
right,
right, and that person has a history,
yeah,
right, that they can then play with.
So, what is our character's this lawyer? We know he is. Oh, we don't even have a job section in there, do we?
See, this we're learning as we're going.
Profession. There it is.
Okay.
We do have it. Okay, good. So I was like, wow, how did we skip that? But we didn't. So it's a lawyer. Excellent. I should probably save this as something else, but I'll remember to do that. Name. Now this is when we need a name generator, because right, I make my students name them, but
Steve Johnson.
Really?
I don't know. Bartholomew Quigley.
Okay. That's a much better.
That's your name, Jeff. I have no idea where that came from.
Bartholomew.
I wanted to see if Sean could spell Bartholomew. That's the only reason I chose it.
Quigley I'm down with. So, is that Bartholomew? Did I spell that right? I
can't. I don't have my glasses
on. We need to actually make this into a form as well.
It's not right now.
So
this was, we're still editing and
playing around with these. All right. So he is Bartholomew Quigley. And I mean, at some level, I've also talked to my students about using a 19th century or whatever century they're trying to land in kind of name registry. There are a couple of places online that will feed typical names for the time period. So maybe that might be a better way to even think about doing something like this. You can show them how to use census
sheets and just go in there and pull some.
Grab a census sheet and just pull a couple of names out of that hat. Nationality, in this case, I think we'd probably want them to...
I think there's two things we might add something here. I think nationality, like if we say American, right? I think we should have background, like second generation Irish, or something like that, that connects them to...
Yeah, and I think that was when at some point we had, and you can see down in here, I'm showing the behind the scenes stuff.
Ooh.
Where they're where we're trying to kind of
work
these kinds of things into this character sheet. And I think that's what, when we had originally been playing with these kinds of ideas here.
Some of that's still in there, just repurposed.
Right.
But
thinking about kind of that broader nationality, right? Where are they immigrant? Is this second, third, fourth generation? You're right.
Well, I even think of a census record from like 1870, and it would say where they were born, then say where their father was born and where their mother was born. Right. And so you could go into those census records and just see it. Right there.
And I think I am now going to force my students to use census records this year.
You're welcome.
Semester.
Which are super fun. I mean, to look at and use.
And then draft a character from one of those, right? Create an imagined world for one of those individuals that were in the census. So see, this is why we're doing this.
We're brainstorming at the same time. We're pretending like we know what we're talking about.
So we'll call this, then, in this case, our nationality, given his middle class status or his middling class status. Upper class status,
But there would,
Right. I mean...
There's a lot of changes that can happen here.
Place of residence, just to make this faster, I'm just going to say New York. Put them into, although
right in the middle of it.
But
now it's, I think, the thing for students and even for us right now, we start to imagine New York at a whatever time. We don't even know what time period. I'm already imagining sort of a late 19th century sort of situation, which is maybe because the game is situated there too. But now, hopefully, our character or students will start to develop that scenery as they're creating this.
Right, and the the idea here is that they would have enough background information, or at least enough from the primary sources and secondary sources that they have, that they can imagine this 19th century New York, or they can imagine this 18th century kind of pre-revolutionary Boston, or whatever it might be, right? And they'll start to have this kind of
just a concept.
I was going to say this kind of connection to the past in that way. So type of residence, row house, just that's how I imagine it. Although he would probably be a little bit more
more than a row house.
Than a row house.
Or if it's a row, I mean, it'd be something. It could just be. I mean, if we're imagining him as well off, right? He would have a whole not complex, but
there, we'll do a single family Victorian home.
Oh, he's outside.
He's a little outside the city. Okay. He has to take his carriage into the city. Okay. Right, type of residence. I'm not sure what we meant by home. That's the end of my same Victorian home.
Yeah. So
let's pull up. Let's bring that up a little bit here. Right, so I am going to be presumptuous. I'm going to be presumptuous
as being both upper class and being a lawyer,
and being outside. Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
But only in this case.
Right. He is a lawyer. If we were going in this world, I'm also now just imagining him as a WASP. So
are you?
Yeah. He's not going to be a Catholic lawyer.
Well,
he could be, but
could be the Protestant.
Right. So we're going Protestant. And we've already been saying he.
Right.
So we have gendered.
Which is not
already.
I mean, the presumption is clear for 19th century.
Right. Yeah. And then age. This is where things depends on how where we're going to take this kind of this narrative or character approach, right? Is he a young lawyer? Given that he has a single family Victorian home, one would assume that he'd spent some time already in practice, has built a reputation for himself, and has a family.
I'm going to say early 40s.
Okay, wow. I was going to say 38, but
cool. That's my original idea. It was 38, right, but I was thinking 38 to 42.
All right.
I think we're in the
same ballpark.
Yeah, field here.
Well, it's the 19th century.
5'7".
Okay. Fine.
What were you going to say?
I was going to give him a little bit more height, but that's all right. But
his hat gives him height.
His bowler.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm already imagining.
Yeah. All right. And he's going to be a little portly because he is living the good life. So let's put him at 195.
Sounds good.
We just finish our hair and eye color. Right. So we'll make him brown hair with hazel eyes. Wow. All right. Okay.
But I like this I'm sorry. I like the concept because it's forcing the visualization.
Yeah, it's right. Now I know what this guy, I mean, we were already putting him in a bowler hat. He already has a waistcoat on with a watch pocket in my brain. Right. Constantly kind of pulling his watch out of that little waistcoat pocket and looking at it. And really setting
you get on a camera.
That's what I do. Watch me come back in. All right. So that would put him then in, right, kind of squarely in as we've created this individual. Right. And to do this again, I want to reinforce that this isn't a random, I mean, the way we're looking at it right now, it feels like it's a little bit random, but the way we're imagining it for our students is that all of these attributes are coming from the sources that they've read, that this would be a typical person that would occupy the world that their sources had imagined, right?
And then some of it's just pure creativity, as long as it fits, right? You're not like Sean had. Yeah. We're not. The Protestant lawyer is going to be of a certain
type. Yeah. So birth date.
Now I think this forces them to think about what year they're occupying.
Yeah, exactly. So if he's 30, if he's in his late 30s, right? He's been, if this is depending on kind of where this is happening, if we're sticking it into the
1865,
right? Yeah.
Back up 40 years.
We just
1835, 1833.
Sure. Does that make him 38? Or do we have to adjust that? Right. Does that make him 38?
No, it would be 37.
37,
Sorry, I went
yeah.
backwards because I was thinking 42 like I originally imagined.
All right. So 1837 is when he was born. So now they have to reimagine, right, a world that
he grew up in,
right? Yeah. So they have to kind of take this character a little bit back in time in order to do this and think about, right, and this would be, I think, particularly interesting in this instance, right, because you're going back to kind of that latter half of the early republic, the beginning of the market economy, right, is the circumstance of his birth. Then, right, are we going to tell, I really don't want to tell a pull yourself up by the bootstraps kind of story, because I think that would just reinforce a variety of myths.
It forces even for us to think about this, because I'm imagining initially, okay, he is American, but he's kind of second generation. His parents came.
Okay.
Cool. It doesn't have to be. It came from Great Britain or Ireland, and if they did,
right.
It's 1837. It's before the major migration. Right. So then we have some, not historical anomalies, but historical differences from the general, narrative that people think about.
English immigrant parents, right?
Something like that, yeah.
Right.
And
then he would have to be legitimate, right?
We would presume.
I mean, given his.
And then we fall out of that narrative of bootstrapping, right? We fall into
more of a social climbing, instead of pulling oneself
Yeah.
up, right? Yeah. All right. So let's then. Yeah, he's gonna be legit.
Even that question, I think, forces students to think about what that means. And
right. So if we were back to our and I mean this is a little presumptuous, right? But if you go back to your rag cooker or your rag picker or your boot black, right? There you have that. I think in some cases it really, you're thinking about class and the realities of class in the 19th century, and where the rag picker could have been orphaned at some point and not even know whether their birth was legitimate, right? Mom could have died in childbirth, leaving them, right, to fend for themselves or whatever it might be. So again, it's really just about having them, right, occupy this world as they're trying to develop a sense of who this character is going to be that we're going to be playing. Parents, I think in this instance, are we actually trying to name those parents? And thinking about, right, because if circumstances it was born in English immigrants, we could repeat, I guess.
Yeah, we could.
Right.
I guess we could.
This would be kind of English immigrant.
If they want to name them, they could. Right.
Right.
All of I think all the time, not all the questions have to be
answered. Right. No. But, and I think there are places where they might not be able to answer them. Right. So, would all of your characters know of their birth, right, and whether or not they had a legitimate, right, a legitimate birth. I guess that's right. Yeah. Right. Are the parents alive or dead? We're gone 40 years at this point.
Yeah, probably, unless they died of some disease.
Right. And this is one of those moments where that creativity can come in, right? Because now you're already starting to think about, right, the kind of conflicts that might arise within this character from the situation of his family life.
Right. Or does he have 8 kids and his mom died in childbirth on the 8th one? Or
right. And that would kind of just go to the number of siblings thing right here, and I, as we're doing this, I'm having fun with this, and I wonder if it's because I've got Right. I have a relationship with like RPG character sheets and building characters that I think are interesting.
Right.
Right. And
Maybe.
getting to kind of play at that. And this is where we get to have to test this out this semester with students, and having them build these kind of character sheets out and see if they find this too confining or too difficult. Right.
Yeah, that could, I suppose, go either way.
Where you just become almost frozen by the amount of choice that we're throwing into this space.
I mean, there's
right?
always that potential. I mean, I know our idea was to provide direction and to provide a creative forum. And I think we have to present it as that. Like, this is merely a project to get you in the world. But you know, creating characters is maybe more interesting for us.
Right.
It'd probably be different in the upper division 306 class, because a lot of people come into that with an idea of playing games
right.
and having an idea. The lower division is much more disparate, even with kind of the rise of D&D 5, right?
Right.
That a lot of people at least dabble
in
it
games,
and have an
yeah.
association. It's still not permeated.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, yeah. So I mean, this is going to be an interesting thing to see how they handle this. Is when we're getting getting into this family history. My brain's just going a mile a minute, and like, okay, so I want, let's say I want Dad to be dead.
Oh, so good.
Mom to be alive.
I love how I imagine Dad had remarried, Mom was dead.
Oh.
But it doesn't matter. Like,
right.
This is the whole point. Like, this could have influence, just the beginning
right.
of the game, influence on what happens in the game by creating
right.
different scenarios.
And I imagined him as the eldest who inherits the father's wealth.
Good old primogeniture.
And has also the added responsibility of caring for Mom. Right.
So he's a grumpy 19th century.
And then his siblings, right, those that are still alive.
It was one of these rag pickers.
Exactly.
Who he
and
has
the
to
cook.
talk to every once in a while.
And the rag picker and the cook. Right. I would say it's strained because of the economic disparity in the family. And we'll say 2 are women and 4 existing are men.
I think the fun thing here
right.
is when you say 8 and then 6 are alive,
right.
is that the students start thinking about these sort of social realities of mortality, right, as being very extant in these worlds.
Yeah, and I mean, in some ways, the legal relationships that existed in a kind of 19th century family, right? I mean, filial love was a part of it, but you know, there are legal restrictions, there are tradition that are going to advantage, right, the eldest in many cases, and leave others behind, right? And now I'm already building out, right, a Thanksgiving meal.
I kind of want to RPG this character.
Right. So let's say the 2 that died. I'm gonna do this because they were twins.
I'm gonna reframe.
That's fine. Yeah, I keep dumping into. We just were trying to hide the whiteboard that's behind me.
People can see our notes.
They were twins that died in childbirth. Were the 2 dead?
I think Quigley is maimed. He got run over by a horse.
Damn. Okay. Where does that go?
I don't know. Physical.
And his strength has been. Okay. So his strength will be limited. We'll put him on a 5 scale there.
He is a lawyer. Can we imagine him sort of
in a carriage accident? All right.
It's terrible.
Back up. So they've got the twins that died in childbirth, which then had a tremendous effect on his relationship with his own children. But strange.
But he's also dead. His strength is... Oh, Dad's dead. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Like, how can he be dead?
Dad dead. I'm alive.
Right. His wife is alive.
Yeah, we don't. I mean, we haven't gotten to his current family though, right?
Okay,
Because
right.
his current status
There we
is
go.
down
Okay,
here.
thank you.
Yeah. And we have to kind of keep that in mind. Let's see. Oh well, I guess I could take that and drop it into this one. That question that we asked.
Yeah.
All right.
And then we get to this. I think the next question follows well, because is this just background information or is it part of the story? Like, in what way does it affect the character?
Right. I think a lot of this, yeah, to me...
There's things that could come up in the story if they're not part of the story, right? As just talking points or something to flesh out a character. Or they could be somehow part of a narrative you're trying to demonstrate.
Right.
I mean, this could simply be a story about filial relations in the 19th century, right?
Yeah, I'm thinking, oh god, what was Silas Dean, the 19th century novel Silas Dean, where he inherits basically his father's paint manufacturing, and he kind of rises out of that lower middle class into an upper middle class world, and it's basically the family drama of the new relationships in the 19th century market economy that's kind of growing. And you could, I mean, that would be, to me, a really interesting and fun kind of
it'd be probably a bit
game.
Much for
well, for sure. Yeah, I mean, without a doubt. Hey, we're going to go deep into the market economy and family in the 19th century. But for an upper division class, right?
It should be at least possible to.
And you could have him read Silas Dean. Now I really can't remember. I'm trying to remember who the author of that was. So this is, I mean, this is how this is going to work, right? We're now 45 minutes into talking about this and kind of depth and we've gotten like maybe half-ish across the first page of this character sheet. But I think a lot of it is also just think, right? I mean, there's a benefit to having to think through all of this. And even if the students don't use all of the situations that they're now seeing their character in, right? There's at least a starting point where they're starting with not only the world in mind, but the character in mind. And when they get to that first card in Twine, or that first passage in Twine, and they have to kind of give us that opening, exposition, it won't be, hopefully, that it was a dark and stormy night kind of thing, right? No, I mean, but because that's when they're sitting down and they're just raw, frozen. Right? And
this builds a world.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, I'm going to build a world, but I don't really know how to build a world, so I'm going to describe a muddy street and my character, and that's it, right? And it's raining, and there's a disconnect between the historical world and landscape that they're trying to create, and so here I think this is going to give them, hopefully, a bit of a...
This might serve well, and maybe you imagine it such. I hadn't imagined it totally is. Having them do this in a class period or two, like when you're there, walking around and as a group, going through this so you can consult them. And the two other points. Second thing is, like, imagining the landscape, the environment, the world is, from there, once they develop this, is having them write out that landscape right away. Like, how do you see this? And then we could consult them right away, like, to see how that is created. And I think the third thing that may be beneficial is, They could go back to make sure there's no contradiction in character development from
Mm-hmm.
not that they have to stick to this, but are they becoming ahistorical in their development
Right.
away from like the historicity of this character? Might be a way to check themselves in some way.
Yeah, for sure. It wasn't Silas Dean. Silas Dean was
He was the
turncoat
18th century.
in the 18th.
Yeah, that's
he
what
was
I
the 18th century turncoat, and
Yeah.
and now I'm trying to remember what the novel was that I was referencing. It was something I read way back in grad school in the 90s, and now it's totally escaping me. But the entire plot of the novel isn't. It's all there, but I'll remember it at some point. So.
You're not thinking of Kingdom of Matthias, right?
No. It really was a 19th century like middle class family melodrama around the inheritance of a paint manufacturing.
We should continue.
Anyway, yeah, we should. Yeah, this is. Tune in for exciting trying to remember the names of novels.
There's probably a podcast on that.
Right. So we might need to do exactly what we're asking our students to do, which is to kind of break this up into two sessions.
Break them into sessions, and I think there's another sheet there to then like have sheets about building the environment.
The environment in the world.
Yeah, I think we should construct something like that. Right. Again, I don't see these as constraints as so much affording them the ability to think about how to do it.
Right.
Like here are ways through it versus just having a prompt. Even if the prompt said name how old they are, name
right.
their name. Like this is, I think, as a sheet.
Yeah, and we're gonna have to turn this all into a form and make it a little more formal.
Yeah.
Formal. That was good.
Yeah.
Shall we end this one here?
Yeah, I think we're good.
On the beginning of this character. So if you really want to know what happens to Bartholomew Quigley, a 19th century lawyer from New York who has some family drama, you'll have to tune in again or come back and see how we work through that and how he's going to ultimately fit into the narrative of the game.
We're gonna do.
Yeah.
I think too, maybe next time we will have a sheet on environment or something.
For sure.
And we will, once we get this developed and kind of through, we will get into Twine and start developing that. And once we're in Twine, obviously it's not just about the narrative, but it is about
mechanics, building the game, making the game actually function in a way.
Which we really want to show our students how to do that and how to do it in an interesting way. And
hopefully move them beyond the kind of binary choices that they're comfortable doing.
Yeah.
So. All right. Thanks for watching. Nobody was watching the stream, so thanks for watching on YouTube when we eventually post this up. We're trying to do this fairly regularly.
It's been good so far.
My schedule means that I can't say specifically whether we're going to do it on a Tuesday or a Thursday. But typically it'll be on one or the others at 2 p.m. Pacific time. So if there is interest, and I'll try my best from here on out to go to Twitter and to tweet out when we'll be doing these live streams, because it'd be fun to have people commenting and have a conversation about what we're thinking about and how we're going about this creation process. So if you want to join us on that, you can follow us on Twitter at criticalplay.org. And I will try to remember to make those announcements.
Come on, Mr.
Yes,
Social Media.
I know that makes me like responsible for something.
Right.
Oh well. So thanks again, and we will see you all next time.
In the future.